The story took place in 1999. Japanese explorer Ken Noguchi was traveling the world when he encountered the girl during his journey through Mongolia. Her name was Purev Jargal, but everyone called her Purev. She was only 6 years old, yet she lived like an adult. Every morning, Purev would saddle her horse and ride out alone across the boundless grasslands, watching over 700 sheep, 7 cows, and 20 horses. With the wind in her hair and determination in her eyes, she looked like a child raised by the earth itself, fierce, graceful, and completely at home on the steppe. Intrigued by their encounter, Ken returned the next day to find out more about her. He arrived at a traditional Mongolian yurt, where Purev lived with her grandmother and little cousin. Her grandmother greeted him kindly and served him warm buttered tea, the traditional way to welcome a guest on the steppe. But behind her brave image, the truth was far more heartbreaking. At the age when most kids are starting school, Purev was already living a life filled with hardship. Her parents were both gone. 3 months earlier, their family's 40 horses had been stolen. Her mother left to search for them and never came back. Her father, unable to bear the harsh life on the grassland, abandoned the family shortly after their second child was born. He said he was going to the capital, Ulaanbaatar, to find work, but no one had heard from him in over 3 years. In this broken family, there were only 3 people left: an elderly grandmother, a toddler cousin, and little Purev. There was no one else to rely on. So Purev grew up fast. Too fast. Every morning, Purev woke up before sunrise to tend to her family's 700 sheep, 7 cows, and 20 horses. She was only 6, but her days were filled with adult responsibilities, riding horseback across the fields, chopping wood, building fires, and cooking meals. Her only helper was her little cousin Basa, who was just 3 years old. Ken, the explorer, couldn't help but admire this little girl's strength and maturity. But as the days passed, he began to realize this wasn't the life she wanted. As they grew closer, Purev slowly let her guard down. She confided in Ken that more than anything, she wanted to go to school. Maybe, she said, if she could become a teacher one day, she'd finally get to see the world beyond the grassland. One day, Purev's mother finally came home. She had spent an entire month searching near the country's border, but found no trace of the stolen horses. She was only 32 years old, but her face was already weathered by years of hardship. Still, her return brought pure joy to the children. For the first time in days, the frown on Purev's face disappeared. In front of her mother, she finally acted like the child she truly was. Hiding behind her, shyly turning her face away from the camera, smiling like she hadn't in a long time. Her mother had endured more than most could imagine, searching for horses under the blazing sun by day and sleeping alone on the freezing grassland by night. Yet as she spoke about it, she smiled, brushing it off like it was nothing. She stayed only 2 days before heading out again, but before leaving, she made Purev a solemn promise. "Next year, I will send you to school." Deep down, she knew it was the only way her daughter could escape this life. After her mother left again, the first snow of the season began to fall. Normally, herding families would move to winter pastures hundreds of miles away. But with her mother still gone, Purev's family had no choice but to stay and wait. As the weather worsened, the livestock began to suffer in the cold. Purev tried to build a shelter for a shivering calf, but she was too small and too weak to finish it on her own. Frustrated and desperate, she cried and prayed, hoping the little one wouldn't freeze to death. Luckily, the storm passed, and just in time, her mother returned. She hadn't found the stolen horses, but at that moment, nothing mattered more than simply being together again. Grandmother sat quietly tinkering with the old radio, their only connection to the outside world. Meanwhile, their mother handed out treats from the city. Basa grabbed the biggest cookie and stuffed it into his mouth, his face lighting up with joy. Purev curled up beside her mother, her smile brighter than anything else in the yurt. In that moment, if time could stand still, their quiet joy would be the warmest sight of winter. After spending 2 months together, Purev's family had fully accepted Ken. Her grandmother now treated him not as a visitor, but as one of their own. When the weather finally cleared, Ken offered to take a family photo. Purev and her mother stood shyly on the grass, smiling softly. It was a rare and precious moment, everyone together at peace. Winter on the steppe was far from over. As the family prepared to move to their winter pasture before the next storm hit, Ken also began packing. It was time for him to continue his journey. Before they parted ways, Purev's mother offered Ken a strong horse to help him travel. When Ken realized it was Purev's favorite, his heart sank. He didn't have the heart to take it. Purev, though reluctant, handed over the reins with grace. Ken could see the sadness in her eyes. Gently, he told her he couldn't take the horse and instead asked her to take care of it until spring, when he promised he'd return to visit them again.
컴퓨터 오시노?何に使うの?
Before leaving, Ken asked Purev what gift she wanted. He expected a complicated answer, but the little girl shyly said she just wanted a video game console. Ken agreed without hesitation. To see him off, the family brewed milk tea. Grandma smiled warmly, but in her heart she was still worried, wondering when Purev would finally be able to go to school. The next spring, with snow still melting on the steppe, Ken returned to Mongolia. He stopped in Ulaanbaatar first, carefully picking out a game console as a gift. After some travel, he finally reached Purev's camp. But when they met, her face didn't light up. Instead, she looked deeply troubled. Back inside the yurt, Ken was greeted by Purev's uncle. The man hesitated and said her mother had gone to the city, asking Ken not to ask further. Then Grandma rode in on horseback, still as kind and warm as ever. But when Ken asked about Purev's mother, he finally learned what going to the city truly meant. In steppe tradition, people are not supposed to grieve too much when a loved one passes, so the spirit can rest in peace. Purev's mother had passed away. The news struck Ken like a whip. He couldn't believe it. The strong, smiling woman he once knew was now only a portrait on a table. Just months ago, she had written Ken a letter, telling him the horse was healthy, that Purev would soon start school, and wishing everyone happiness. She said she looked forward to seeing him again. But now, though Ken had kept his promise and returned, the one who wrote that letter was gone forever. A month earlier, while helping neighbors herd horses, Purev's mom had fallen and was trampled by a running horse. The camp was too far from the city. By the time help arrived, 3 days later, it was too late. The wind on the steppe still blew as always, but now it carried away the strongest soul in their home. After her mother passed, Purev cried herself to sleep every night in Grandma's arms. Only when her uncle arrived did things ease a little. That day, she curled up in his lap, clutching the game console Ken had brought. For a moment, the grief seemed to lift, just a little. Then Ken took out a photo album he had carefully made, full of pictures from their time together. The smiling faces felt like memories from just yesterday. When Purev saw her mother's face again, she smiled for the first time in days. It was the happiest moment she'd had in a long time. A few days later, Purev finally started school. Grandma took her to stay with relatives near Ulaanbaatar. On the first day, she wore a bright red ribbon in her hair and walked hand in hand with her cousin. In class, she listened with all her heart. She was the first in her family to ever attend school, and she carried everyone's hopes with her. That day happened to be the 7th day after Purev's mother passed away. After school, the family went to visit her grave. But when Purev tried to get out of the car, Grandma stopped her. According to Steppe tradition, children aren't allowed to attend grave sites for the first 3 years. So she stayed inside, watching in silence as her family gathered around the mound of earth. Beneath that unmarked mound lay the person they all loved most. Her uncle stood quietly, tears welling in his eyes, and Grandma, always so strong, could no longer hold back. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "It's okay." But everyone knew her heart was breaking, but life's hardships didn't stop there. That winter, a once-in-decades blizzard hit the grasslands. Many nomads lost their tents, and countless animals froze to death. Purev's family suffered too. When emergency food arrived, the government said they had to pay for it. But with their livestock gone, they had nothing left. They could only watch helplessly as one animal after another collapsed. There was nothing they could do. Grandma had lived through many winters like this. Quietly, she told Ken, "As long as we survive, things will get better." 2 years later, spring brought life back to the grasslands. Ken returned once more to visit the family he had come to know so well. Grandma welcomed him like a son, and Purev, now taller and more confident, had become skilled at herding. In every gesture, Ken could see traces of her late mother. That year, the weather was kind and the livestock were strong. The family slaughtered a sheep to welcome Ken. Outside, the vast steppe stretched under a clear blue sky. Inside, the family sat together, sharing warm food, soft laughter, and a rare sense of peace. During the meal, young Purev told Ken she no longer wanted to become a teacher. Instead, she dreamed of learning many languages and becoming a translator. That way, she could travel the world, just like Ken. Maybe one day, she said, she could even visit his country and watch the sunset there. The next morning, Ken was set to leave once again. Before he left, Grandma handed him dried mutton and kissed his cheek, just like a mother would her own child. As the car engine started, Grandma could no longer hold back her tears. She stood quietly in the wind, crying. In her old age, she had already said goodbye to her husband and daughter-in-law. She knew too well, every farewell might be the last time you see someone. 3 years later, Ken completed his journey around the world and returned once again to the steppes of Ulaanbaatar. But this time, as he stepped inside the home, he found Grandma sobbing uncontrollably. The woman who always smiled through hardship now let her sorrow pour out like a flood. Ken walked inside, hoping to see Purev, but all he found was her photo. The bold, fearless girl of the grasslands was gone. The day before her elementary graduation exams, she was struck by a runaway truck and died. She would never leave the steppe. She now rested there, forever. That wildflower of a girl who dreamed of teaching, of learning languages, of seeing the world, now rested beside her mother's grave. In the end, only Grandma and 8-year-old Batsa remained in the herding camp, and just like that, the story of Ulaanbaatar quietly came to a close. Ken stood with Grandma and little Batsa at Purev's grave. This time, Grandma did not cry. Holding her grandson close as he sobbed, she gently comforted him. Then she turned to Ken and said, "Look forward. Do not look back." Perhaps this was the wisdom she had gained through a lifetime of sorrow. Suffering is just suffering, it holds no glory. But in this story, we saw resilience within hardship, warmth in the cold, and the fierce will of ordinary people to keep going. One day, if you come to understand the harsh truth of life, do not be afraid. Do not retreat. Be like Grandma, still loving, still moving forward. That is what gives life its meaning.